Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we are really opening the vault on the modern young adult publishing industry.
We are. We're going way past the filters of book talk and, the glitz of the bestseller lists.
Exactly. We're going behind the curtain, or I guess right into the sweaty, slightly disorganized chaos of a major annual industry event.
And our mission today for you is to go beyond those viral trends. It's to really understand the complex machinery, the intense marketing pressures, and the creative anxieties that are defining YA literature right now.
We're going to do that by dissecting the insights from this one. Very immersive, very intensely structured day at YALit Fest.
That's the Young Adult Literature Lovers Fest, which was just held in Charleston, South Carolina.
Yeah, and we're basically using this festival as a kind of microcosm. For anyone who's trying to get quickly informed about what really drives publishing today, this experience was a massive item.
It really was. It shows you exactly where the industry's resources, its attention, and frankly, its cash are flowing in 2025.
And that flow is often directed, away from the actual craft of writing.
And it's important to remember, YALit Fest has a history. Our sources point out that it had this earlier, more, let's say, literary era.
Right.
It was the home turf for some really foundational names. We're talking about the authors who basically built the modern fantasy landscape.
Like Cassandra Clare or the early success of someone like Rick Riordan.
Exactly. Back then, the focus felt more centered on things like world building and narrative structure, craft.
But the initial vibe check this year, it was completely dominated by the corporate hand. You just couldn't miss it.
No.
Surprising detail number one, the event was openly and visibly sponsored by TikTok.
And we don't mean subtle logos in the corner of a banner.
No, this was full, unavoidable corporate underwriting by the very platform that, dictates the speed and the whole aesthetic of the contemporary market.
Well, when your primary marketing engine becomes your primary sponsor, the entire nature of the event just changes, right?
It has to.
It shifts from being a purely literary convention to something that feels, closer to a content generation hub.
Or a very, very elaborate product launch.
Yes. The line between critical discussion and just pure promotion becomes essentially non-existent.
And you could feel that structural shift immediately in the schedule, the schedule paradox.
Oh, definitely. If you compare this to academic or professional writers' conference,
like AWP, the Association of Writers in Writing.
Right. At AWP, everyone knows the real events happen after 6:00 p.m.
Of course. Over late-night meals or at some impromptu bar gathering, the official schedule is just the backdrop.
But YALit Fest was the opposite. It was structured as this single grueling day.
We were literally scheduled from 8:00 a.m. to 5:00 p.m., just moving from panel to signing with barely enough time to grab a lukewarm coffee.
And our source material notes this complete lack of any planned night, no organic after-hours network.
The schedule actively discouraged it. It discouraged the unscripted mingling that usually generates the most honest
It felt less like a convention focused on community and more like a mandated job.
It really did.
It was pure transactional efficiency. Come in, you consume the content, you get your book signed, and you are immediately shuffled out.
It maximized the sheer amount of stuff you could see in a short time, but it minimized any chance for genuine human connection that wasn't, prearranged.
It was exhausting.
So exhausting. But even with all that corporate rigor, we did have a clear target for our deep dive. The gravitational center of the entire event, the biggest name there, was Aster, author of the huge bestseller Lightlark and Grimm and Oro.
And her presence and the things she revealed both on stage and kind of off offered the most potent window into the state of YA expectations and the true cost of chasing this hyper-accelerated market.
And that cost, as we found out, is deeply personal.
Very.
Okay, let's unpack this. We had to start with Aster because she was positioned perfectly as the new model of success.
Absolutely. She was featured in the keynote address and the really crucial writing across audiences panel.
Her role there was so clear.
It was. She was there to perform her solo act, demonstrating her mastery over the craft of writing.
It was meant to showcase both, literary achievement and this commercial, market-driven savvy.
Yeah.
The expectation was set astronomically high.
And the reality started with this fascinating, almost anticlimactic moment at the signing line.
Right. So we had sprinted to the bookstore to get a copy of the Grimm and Oro double feature. A book, I'll confess, we might not have sought out otherwise, but you had to have it for the signing.
You had to.
So we get into this chaotic serpentine queue.
And when she finally arrived, there was no celebrity fanfare, no dramatic entrance.
None. She just walked directly past everyone waiting, went behind the long table where she was going to be signing.
It was a very clinical, professional arrival. It was all about prioritizing the rapid start of the signing process over any kind of spectacle.
Her job in that moment was high-volume transaction, not performance.
But then you get to the brief personal interaction, and that's where you get a glimpse into the finely tuned persona of the modern YA superstar.
We noticed it immediately. This practiced, really comforting intonation. She addressed us with the ease of someone talking to a known friend,
Yeah.
It just immediately dissolved the awkwardness of a high-pressure, time-crunched interaction.
And that's a crucial skill for an author at this level. You have to instantaneously generate a sense of personal connection.
Make the reader feel like they're the single most important person.
While operating this machine-like, efficient workflow. It's emotional labor, and it's designed for maximum customer satisfaction.
We found that the best way to kind of bypass the performance was through specificity. We didn't talk about her fantasy blockbusters. We told her how much we appreciated her earlier contemporary romance, Summer in the City.
And her reaction was remarkably genuine.
It really was.
She seemed to genuinely light up at the specific positive feedback on a non-fantasy type. She even mentioned how much of her own kind of stream of consciousness personality was poured into that specific book.
It was such a quick, telling snapshot of the dichotomy she has to manage.
Totally. The necessity of producing these massive commercial high-stakes fantasy versus the personal value she places on smaller, more intimate contemporary.
And the latter is constantly being threatened by the market's demand.
And here's where the cost of that market demand became just brutally, emotionally apparent. This is where it gets really...
We have to spend time on the unhealthy pace of production described, because it was a really candid moment of distress.
It was. During that Writing Across Audiences panel, Aster delivered this highly emotional, almost tearful confession about the immense personal toll of being constant debts.
The phrases she used were truly harrowing. They just revealed a core truth about the industry's current expectations.
She talked about feeling compelled to deliver, not just by her contract, but because, quote, people want them, so I need to deliver.
But the personal sacrifice was absent.
Yeah.
The specific quotes were just, wow, I don't have a life, I don't sleep.
And a really chilling confession that she is a stranger to my family and friends.
She even said that she doesn't mark the passage of days. She'll suddenly realize that the seasons have changed and months have just vanished because she's in this perpetual, exhausting fugue state of writing.
I mean, that is not the glamorous image of the successful, celebrated author.
Not at all.
This is a person admitting to acute self-imposed burnout, and it's driven by market fear.
That fear is the key driver. She articulated the core market reality so clearly. She said, I don't know if they will want my books in a few years, so my mentality is kind of like, okay, I'll sleep then, I won't sleep now.
That just translates the constantly shifting social media trend cycle directly into an existential anxiety for the author.
If you stop producing, you lose visibility, and the market forgets you.
So the clear message here is that success demands the sacrifice of your health and your personal. For you, the listener, trying to understand the inner workings of this field, this is the hidden price tag.
It's the price attached to those bright, shiny fantasy blockbusters that sell millions of copies.
But what's so fascinating is the simultaneous need for self-mythologizing.
Right. While she was being brutally honest about the toll, she also offered these hyper-compelling anecdotes to frame that struggle.
Exact. The modern author has to be the master of their own. She told this story about losing her manuscript 3 times, hard drive failed.
A story that culminated in her going to the Apple Store crying because she hadn't backed up her work.
So let's unpack that concept of self-mythologizing for a second. Why is that anecdote, crying at the Apple Store, more valuable than her discussing the 3-act structure of her novel?
Well, it accomplishes several critical marketing goals at once.
Yeah.
First, it humanizes the superstar. It makes her instantly relatable. We all know that panic of technological failure.
Right. Second, it reinforces the narrative of the struggling, hardworking artist. A person so dedicated that she's risking her work on a shitty MacBook as the implication rather than stepping away.
And that emotional narrative drives engagement, sympathy, outrage, connection far better than a dry discussion of plot mechanics ever could.
So whether or not a multimillionaire author would actually have a computer that failed 3 times without knowing how to use cloud backups is second.
It is. The narrative itself is what matters. The struggle becomes part of the product.
And that's the key. The modern successful author, by necessity, has to be better at talking about the emotional process of writing and the struggle of their professional life than they are at simply talking about the academic mechanics of writing itself.
And this commitment to the content machine, it extended to her marketing strategy. Aster said she was posting multiple times a day for an entire year before her book release.
Just think about the volume of content creation that requires. That's dozens, maybe hundreds of hours not spent writing.
And she delivered the ultimate summary of the modern author's plight with this profound resignation. She said, "None of us got into this because we wanted to be social media stars, but we have to."
Wow, that confirms it. The job description has fundamentally changed.
Completely. You are a content developer, a full-time marketer, and an emotional labor provider who also happens to have to write a novel at an unsustainable pace.
Okay, so if that's the impossible workload demanded of the author, let's look at how that corporate pressure and that need for constant output translated into the quality or lack of quality in the formal panel discussion.
Yeah, we move from that intense pressure on the headliners to the content being presented, and we saw this really fascinating engineered clash.
A clash between attempting to deliver high-minded craft advice and the necessary concessions to the commercial demands of the internet.
It was so apparent in the titles. The panels all followed this weirdly formulaic structure.
Right, two distinct phrases separated by a colon.
One phrase was pure internet slang, like, "the vibes are immaculate," and the second was this pseudo-academic thing like the aesthetics of storytelling.
And that is a highly calculated move by the organizers. They're trying to appeal to two critical but very distinct demographics at the same time.
The hyper-online youth audience who gets the slang and drives the sales.
And the industry or academic crowd who pays for the tickets and demands some semblance of intellectual value.
Colon is the bridge, or the attempt to bridge the unbridged.
And that formula extended into how every single author defined their work. It didn't matter if it was a formal panel, a quick book signing chat, or an accidental after-hours bar encounter.
Every single pitch was the X meets Y with a smidget of Z formula.
We saw this anatomical consistency everywhere. It's always like a really popular recent title meets a known literary staple, plus something quirky to distinguish it.
So you get, it's Peaky Blinders meets King Arthur, but with vampires and a heist element.
And the fact that it was so consistent proves that this isn't organic. It's standard operating procedure. It's what authors are taught to communicate marketability to agents, editors, and now direct readers.
So let's dive into our first panel failure case study, why we edit books.
Okay.
This featured authors who were described as very old and established. We walked in expecting, sophisticated, high-level craft discussion.
And the demographic in the room reflected that. It was fewer young readers, more established industry veterans.
But the content was rudimentary, to the point of being a real disappointment.
It was information that any practicing writer, or even someone who had, like you said, ever watched a YouTube video about how to write, would already know.
It was so dry. Just basic concepts like revising for clarity or the subjectivity of feedback.
So why do you think these established professionals are spending valuable conference time delivering such basic introduction?
I think it's likely twofold. First, they might be mandated by the organizer or the sponsoring publisher to cover material that's deemed universally applicable, which almost always defaults to the most basic advice.
Okay.
And second,
they might be appealing to the newest wave of debut authors or aspiring writers there, effectively treating the panel as a very rudimentary Writer 101 class, even if it leaves seasoned attendees feeling bored.
But even in that dryness, we did pull out a few interesting industry details, specifically about what we could call a writing trap.
Right. There was this discussion about the popular advice to write how you speak, and then at the same time, this push to cut all filler words like or very from the prose.
And this is a crucial point for critical analysis, because while eliminating excessive filler is standard stylistic advice, our observation was that sometimes the hyper-focus on stripping away natural speech patterns can unintentionally function as a demographic dog whistle.
Can you explain that a bit more clearly? What's the subtle signal being sent there? Well, a dog whistle here would be an instruction that seems neutral on the surface, but really targets a specific demographic or cultural group. If a writer is told to remove all signs of a conversational, highly verbal voiciness, they're implicitly being told to conform to a very specific, often standardized and academic version of...
So you're stripping away the character's authentic voice.
Exactly. Unique voice often mimics natural conversational speech pattern, especially in younger or marginalized protagonists. Stripping that away can sterilize the prose, making it less authentic to the protagonist's actual background, all in favor of a homogenized, marketable voice.
Which makes that advice way more complicated than just be clear. You're potentially sacrificing authenticity for perceived profession.
Precisely. And another critical detail that came out of that same panel was about the economics of editing.
Oh, this was shocking.
We learned about the increasing economic strain leading to a noticeable decline in publishing houses providing sensitivity.
For a house to actively pull back on ensuring cultural or thematic accuracy, especially in YA, seems so counterintuitive. You'd think they'd want to avoid market backlash.
The source material suggests this is a hard economic decision. It's purely cost-driven.
A panelist said something like, recession and inflation are really big right now.
And in the face of that, publishing houses are choosing not to afford external readers for every type. It's a choice based purely on economics, not because the need for those critical perspectives has diminished.
It just shifts the burden and the risk back onto the individual author.
Exactly.
Okay, so moving on. Our second major disappointment was the panel called The Aesthetics of Storytelling.
I had such high hopes this one.
Me too. We went in hoping for a deep dive into tropes, genre trappings, narrative architecture.
And we received none of that.
None. The panel, despite its title, completely failed to discuss aesthetic. It evolved almost immediately into authors just plugging their recent novels.
And sharing brief anecdotes about their world-building inspirations and these meandering conversations about their writing habit.
The great irony, as we noted, is that the session we actually found success, the one called Retellings and Fave Tales, was far more aesthetic than the one actually titled to be about aesthetics.
It just goes to show you that the structure provided by the conference is often a poor indicator of the actual value inside the discussion.
It suggests either a chronic lack of skilled moderation or maybe a mandate to just allow authors maximum time for promotion, even if it sacrifices the intellectual rigor attendees are paying.
But the panel did yield one highly relevant discussion.
It did. The difficulty of finding the line in YA concerning permissible content.
Specifically sexuality and violence. This is an industry-wide headache.
It is. And that discussion inevitably led the panelists to a shared conclusion. The industry desperately needs to resurrect the defunct new adult category.
Okay, so for those who aren't industry veterans, what exactly is new adult and why is that so vital?
New adult, or NA, typically focuses on protagonists aged, say, 18 to 25. It was a category that tried to launch about a decade ago, but never quite solidified.
Why did it fail? It was often just conflated with steamy YA, right?
Precisely. It became a dumping ground for books with more explicit sexual content, rather than a genuine exploration of the issues facing college-aged characters.
But the need for the category now is greater than ever because the content within young adult has expanded so dramatically.
We now have books being categorized as YA that span everything from the middle grade action-adventure feel of a Percy Jackson,
where the stakes are high, but the emotional content age-appropriate for a young,
all the way up to high-stakes, highly sexual, violent, and mature fantasy, like the massive current hit Fourth Wing.
And the industry needs a label that allows readers to distinguish between them. Without a new adult label to signal that higher level of maturity, readers and booksellers are constantly frustrated.
The conclusion was unanimous. Content, not just age bracket, demands clear segmentation.
Thankfully, we finally found a success.
We did. The last panel we attended, Retellings and Fave Tales, featuring Allison Saft and Trung Linh, was the breath of fresh air we were hoping.
This panel was everything the others weren't. It was highly articulated, specific, and provided genuinely refreshing insights into the creative process.
They focused on true craft. They weren't just plugging their books. They were actually discussing the process.
They were able to articulate what specific elements they drew from folklore, how they structurally incorporated it into their world building, and importantly, why they had to cut certain elements that, while historically accurate to the myth, didn't serve their specific narrative goals.
That specificity was key. I remember one author talked about how they chose a very obscure version of a European folktale just to avoid the overfamiliarity of, like, the Disney version.
And consciously focusing on the deep, messy, emotional core of the original source material.
And the core advice coming from this highly specific discussion was completely counterintuitive to the entire corporate atmosphere of the festival.
It was. They advised against chasing social media trends or using SEO.
Their unified message was that creatives should embrace all of the weird things about it and focus on the deep specificity of every product.
In a room where every other discussion was about marketability, this was a philosophical statement that deep individuality is the only sustainable, long-term differentiator.
It connects back to a universal artistic truth, doesn't it? That hyper-specific, deeply personal perspective is what ultimately leads universal connection.
In a hyper-commercialized environment, the most valuable advice was to lean into individuality, even the passing interests and weird hobbies, rather than conforming to the immediate marketable formula TikTok.
It felt like a true conversation about literature, so distinct from the commercial pressures.
It was a moment of hope, yeah, before we were plunged back into the structural realities of the event.
And that's where the most cynical observations, but also the most genuine community.
The paradox of attendance was just glaring.
You had these huge, ornate, cavernous theaters set aside for the craft talks and intellectual panels, and they were consistently underpopulated. You could see entire rows of empty seats.
Meanwhile, the purely consumptive activities had massive, chaotic crowds.
We're talking about the ARC drop. And for you, the listener, an ARC is an advanced reader copy, a physical, uncorrected proof of a book, given out for free, often weeks or months before the actual release date.
They're literary gold for dedicated fans and content creators.
So the main draw, the consumptive element, was collecting these physical assets. The ARC drop had people lining up at 4 a.m.
4 in the morning.
We optimistically showed up at 7 a.m. thinking we were early birds, only to find the dedicated collectors had already secured their spot and were deep into the collectathon.
And this massive disconnect, it prompts a very cynical question. Is the event fundamentally designed as a consumptive collectathon? Is the main draw just collecting physical trinkets, the ARCs, the limited edition enamel pins, the character cards, the tote bags, and then using that haul to make free, uncompensated content for the industry?
Well, if you think about it, the industry gets massive free marketing out of this. Attendees make haul videos or unboxing videos where they display all the goods they collected, providing this detailed, excited commentary that functions as free promotion for dozens of upcoming titles.
So the primary motivation for attending shifts from intellectual engagement to resource acquisition for content.
The chaos at the ARC drop was so illustrative of this. After showing up at 7 a.m., we realized the process was a complete mess.
Just a disorganized tangle of vaguely intersecting blobs of people. You had to use social guesswork to figure out which blob was the line for the drop and which was the line for the restroom.
And the volunteers, bless their hearts, seemed utterly overwhelmed and, frankly, a little condescending.
Right. You'd be standing in this massive line stretching onto the pavement, and a volunteer would unhelpfully tell you to move off the sidewalk.
As if the festival hadn't necessitated the street blockage in the first place. They treated the crowds like an imposition rather than the event's core purpose.
So ultimately, we missed the main coveted ARC line. We ended up in a line for the secondary goods.
Stickers, bookmarks, and a single escape room ticket. A lesser haul, for sure, but it illustrated that even the consolation prizes are still collectible assets.
And what's hilarious is that my wife did win that escape room ticket, which provided the only genuine comic relief of the day while we were stuck in the trenches trying to secure interviews.
But even in that consumer chaos, a little serendipity prevailed. While we were waiting in that disorganized line, we met a writer named Kay Brightright.
And she spontaneously performed this act of great generosity. She gave you an extra ticket to the coveted Alex Aster signing.
It proved that genuine human kindness can sometimes override the failures of corporate ticketing and organization.
And that moment and the chance encounter that came later, it really cemented our final take.
Which is that the most valuable and unexpected insights didn't come from the official schedule at all.
No, they came from trying to orchestrate a spontaneous bar crawl later that evening.
We tried to organize an organic gathering, which YALit Fest's schedule actively discouraged. But we walked up this random staircase and accidentally infiltrated a massive debut author gathering.
The bar was just conspicuously filling up with people wearing fresh name tags and carrying industry tote bags.
We managed to strike up a conversation with the husband of a debut author, and he was the ultimate source of intelligence.
He revealed the existence of a highly exclusive, closed Discord chat just for debut authors.
And that led to the larger revelation.
Yeah.
The entire debut author grouping system was prescribed.
Yeah. Publishing companies, or some higher operational entity, were actively pairing up authors and media, the influential booktubers, booktalkers, and reviewers based on perceived echelon or market.
So it wasn't organic networking, it was managed strategy.
It suggests a very deliberate effort to manage the social dynamics and the popularity pecking order within the industry.
They're creating intentional networking opportunities for those at similar levels of clout, ensuring that the relationships formed are strategically beneficial for the publisher, not just spontaneous friendship.
A highly managed, strategic approach to community building. It's designed to maximize the synergy between fresh talent and media.
So, realizing we were media but lacked the proper official credentials for this high-level mingling, we executed a critical sleight of hand check.
A necessity of the hustle.
We found a few discarded name tags and a Sharpie,
Yeah.
and we manually created our own SBU English Club media credentials.
It wasn't the legitimate press badge, but it was enough to signal that you belonged.
It underscored that sometimes to get access to the real story, you have to improvise and hustle.
But despite the cynical, prescribed structuring of you author, the people you met were the absolute opposite.
They were. The debut authors and their partners, including several very supportive spouses and husbands who were just there to cheer them on, were uniformly gracious, kind, and completely lacked the competitive pretense you might expect.
Which suggests that a healthy, if undersized and often underseen middle class of writers does.
I think so. They're operating just outside the main celebrity spotlight, dealing with the same pressures as Alex Aster, but without the massive infrastructure, and yet they retain a community focused on mutual support and genuine enthusiasm for literature.
It was the most positive human element of the entire event.
Yeah. And then finally, we have to talk about the final act of YALit Fest, the game show debacle.
The smackdown.
Yes. This event provided the ultimate, most telling contrast of the entire day. Because despite the low attendance at the serious panel, this closing game show filled the entire massive music hall.
Not an empty seat in the house.
So when the focus shifted from discussing the craft of writing, the intellectual engagement, to pure surface-level entertainment and spectacle, the room was packed to the rafters.
And the level of effort put into the production was undeniable.
It was high effort and very well executed. You could see where the money was spent. It had slick, animated intros narrated by that ubiquitous, slightly creepy robotic TikTok voice.
Backup dancers, pop music cues specifically tailored to the audience, Charlie XCX, Sabrina Carpenter. It was professionally done, like a miniature hyper-pop awards show.
But this is where the cynicism just peaked. While the execution was flawless, the content felt overtly and conspicuously pandery.
The segments, the humor, the music choices, they were all explicitly tailored to appeal directly to a highly specific demographic.
A queer and cis female audience, right down to the deep-cut shipping games featuring characters like Mr. Tumnus from Narnia.
It was engineered to secure immediate, surface-level engagement and applause.
It felt like they had run a focus group and just played back the results for maximum approval, sacrificing any sense of genuine surprise or creative depth.
And the cynicism was compounded by the visible conflict of interest that just permeated the whole thing.
Yeah, the segments were divided by obvious advertisements for upcoming projects that the hosts of the game show were directly involved.
The source notes the pervasive feeling of having bought tickets only to be sold more product.
It transformed what should have been a fun closing event into an extended, high-production infomercial.
So the game show, though technologically advanced and well-performed, was the most cynical part of the entire. It prioritized product placement and surface entertainment over any genuine discussion of literature or craft.
We saw in stark relief
Right.
what the massive audience really came: high-energy spectacle and commercial consumption.
So we've covered everything from crying authors to disorganized ARC lines to managed networking and cynical game shows. So what does this all mean when we put the pieces together?
I think what this deep dive reveals is a publishing industry that's struggling violently with the accelerating, often nonsensical rate of trend change.
The pressure on authors, especially those who find success, is enormous and self-perpetuating. They're being forced to work harder, faster, and sacrifice their personal lives while also taking on the entire burden of social media marketing.
And that's a complete we heard across the entire author spectrum, from the headliners to the debut writers in the bar.
The essential truth is that authors are trapped in a vicious cycle where success demands burn. We heard one author lament that the trends are moving so quickly that by the time you realize a trend is happening, already capped.
And that creates immense anxiety about career longevity and creative viability.
And yet, despite the pervasive TikTok sponsorship and intense corporate pressure, where literally every panel was sponsored by a major publishing house, many authors were surprisingly candid about their struggles.
Right. Aster's emotional breakdown was public and unedited. Other authors openly grumped about the unsustainability of the market.
The fact that critical, honest discussion is still permitted, even under the corporate, offers a small sliver of hope that not everything has been sanitized.
So our final takeaway for you is that the real lessons about the operational reality of the industry are rarely found in the official structured panel.
They're found in the chaos, in the quiet moments of genuine candor, in the disorganized 4 a.m. line, and in the accidental scripted bar.
The modern author needs to be a performer. They have to be experts in self-mythologizing their professional struggles and their personal narrative. Create a compelling story about the process of creation to feed the hungry content.
But beneath that performance, there exists a large, gracious, handed body of writers who are simply trying to navigate an increasingly demanding professional environment with their health act.
And we want to end with a final provocative thought for you to carry forward, something that really struck us deep in the exhaustion of that single, unrelenting day.
During the closing keynote, as the panel was discussing this rapidly accelerating trend, one author worriedly suggested that to survive this environment, they all just have to work faster.
And the implication was so clear. The solution to market pressure is always acceleration. But another author, seizing the conversational opening, cut in with a suggestion that was met with palpable tension.
They suggested, I thought you were going to say we all just need to make everybody else slow down by slowing down ourselves.
And the audience laughed. But it was an uncomfortable, nervous laugh, the kind that signals a philosophical truth that runs counter to all commercial sense.
Which raises an important question for you, whether you're a creator or just an observer of the content. In an ecosystem built entirely on speed, consumption, and immediate relevance, where burnout is literally built into the business model, is the only truly sustainable and defiant rebellion left for a creator to choose deliberately defiant low.
That choice to slow down, To refuse the acceleration is a real world. We've made that choice ourselves, remaining happily stuck in an older era of content. We leave you with that thought to mull over.